Happy Saturday to you, Scott Baker.
It is indeed Mikey Ames. It's Saturday, August 23rd, and talking about today's field note, which is field note 1535, if you're keeping count. The title is, For Top Performers, Practicing the Fundamentals Never Gets Old. And I think we know this. I mean, we watch people drill, we watch musicians drill, we see how pianists practice scales and all of those things. I've heard this as a question, that like an interview question where they'll say, pianists practice scales. What's the thing that you practice regularly?
Yeah.
Which is not a bad interview question. So I don't know, Mikey, what's the thing that you, what's your scales?
I think for me, I think where I would really lose my edge if I wasn't keeping up on like social media tactics. There's a certain kind of reading that I need to do every day, right? Even when it feels like I've got all the basics down. Stuff is changing all the time, and my knowledge of how other people are using it is so. Just continuing to read those subjects, even though it feels like I think I've got it all down, is the closest that I could come up with. I actually thought through this question before you even posed it, thinking, oh, I don't know that I have much, but reading is probably close too. You did broadcasting for a lot of years. I never did that kind of broadcasting. I'm sure there was a lot in that, just with vocal warm up, your presentational style. What were the things that you consistently did that were the basics there?
Well, that is a good point because, wait, I don't think that I do a vocal warm up for the Lead Better podcast.
Sure.
Why, do I not care about you people? You can actually do vocal warm ups, and if you start thinking about it, yeah. But you start to get you can get lazy. But I really did try to kind of go through kind of a positioning of vocal placement, and I'll teach everybody. Right,
sure.
Right now, I can teach everybody. Here's how you do it. So one of the simplest ways is to find the place of what I think they called it the Y buzz, meaning if I hum a note and I can make it high and I can feel it kind of like vibrating up here and I can feel it vibrating here. But if I go, you can, and I go, now everybody can do this at home. But if I've done this in groups and if I go, start up here and then we're going to bring it down and we're going to try to make our lips buzz, right? So if I go, that is where my voice naturally sits. So if I try to be
when you start to feel the buzz, that's
the buzz present in the mask of your face.
Okay.
So what does that take? 20 seconds, maybe less, right? So if I try to be like, well, Mikey, welcome to today's Lead Better because I'm going to sound more authoritative because I'm just speaking in an unhealthy way. I actually won't have the vibrance that I need. So maybe a good broadcaster would do a drill like that. You can also do things that kind of just get you thinking about the way air is flowing through your mouth and all the rest of it. But the point being that it's cited in the field note that whether you're Twyla Tharp and you're a dancer, whether you're Wynton Marsalis and you're you play the trumpet, there are certain things that you do, and it's not like, oh, that thing I started to do in third grade, I stopped doing. No, they tend to do those things all the time for the rest of their lives. And you just see that the people that don't do them, well, they never get to that level of excellence normally.
Right. So I think the first time I ever was given a lesson like this was like in elementary school basketball camp, where they would show us the videos of Pistol Pete Maravich and I think he was the first person to put his dribbling drills on video. And so there's a lot of kids my age who watched through the Pistol Pete videos, right? Before YouTube, before any of this stuff. And we would do that. We would drill the camp. They were taught to us with the idea of like, you do these every day.
Yes, right.
Sure. And it's amazing to see guys like Steph Curry come out and he's got a 20-minute routine that he goes through before every game. And it starts with some of those very simple Pistol Pete video kind of things, that are now 70 years old. But he still starts with some of those very basics.
My dad loved Pistol Pete Maravich and talking about those things, and I remember, being inspired and kind of encouraged to, get out there and not just for that kind of drill, but dribble, 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 just dribble all day long. Just
Right.
practice it over and over, and just between your legs and everything, till it became second nature. And
Right.
and I think that the goal in that is that when you get to a certain level of virtuosity with the thing that just looks so elegant, that's so complicated, that's where you kind of talk about the reintroduction of chaos that creates mastery, which is when I'm ready with all of those things so intuitively, I'm ready for the next level that surprises me because I was ready for the moment.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I was looking at some Steph Curry videos in preparation for this talk, thinking how we might talk. And you're talking about improvisation,
Right.
and when surprising things come your way, that you've got the basics down in such a way that you don't have to think about them and you can go with the flow. Well, in Steph Curry's routine, you can see that he and the coach that he's working with on his warm-up, they do this thing where he pretends to be like a quarterback, and then he pretends like he's playing volleyball, and then he'll toss things. He'll receive a pass from his coach, and he'll bump it like volleyball, and then he'll set it to himself, and then he'll even spike it. Right?
Interesting.
And it's weird when you're watching. It's like, why is he is he just playing? And I think it's more along the idea of what you're saying. I think he's creating for himself wild circumstances so that even when they come his way in the game, it's not a surprise to see something come at him like a curveball.
There also is a great value in reintroducing play. Just the idea that, like, it is your job, but you like it because it's playful, right? That's why we, what was the old, was it Willie Stargell of the Pirates? I think maybe, who said they don't say work ball.
Right.
It's play ball.
Right. Very funny. Okay. So this field note is pretty simple. The directive is pretty self-evident and simple. There's a missing part of this field note because we have some great examples listed in the field note about virtuosity. But we are a leadership development firm, and field notes at the end of the day is always about being a better leader, being a better performer as well. But I think what's missing in this field note is the idea that your leadership skills could have some basics that you can do on a daily basis. That even if you find, like, I've gotten feedback that says I'm a pretty good leader, right? And I've gotten feedback that says maybe I'm even one of these admired leaders that you talk about. There's probably still some things that your leadership skill can be done on a daily basis. What are those things?
Right. And particularly if you were trying to build a new behavior into your style, what am I going to try to do every day without fail for the next 4 to 6 weeks or something like that?
Right. And so I don't want this to be a sales pitch necessarily, but we do end up bringing up our platform on the idea. We've got some very basic behaviors where if you're thinking, oh, there's a good idea, let me Pistol Pete my way to leadership. Yeah. So when I wake up, what is the thing that I can do to make myself a better leader? And it's not just, I reference the idea of reading. I think reading your field note every single day, just kind of give yourself a reference, listening to a podcast that is about this idea of, like, what our relationships are like and how they can be developed. But then we're getting into the idea of, like, how do we motivate people? How do we inspire people? What's the best way for me to deliver feedback, especially when it's going to be a difficult conversation? Like, all of these things, just thinking through them is probably the Pistol Pete kind of thing. We referenced even yesterday in our conversation, maybe it was yesterday, the day before, like, having a family is a great place to try out some of these leadership behaviors that we talk about on a daily basis. But it's something that you should be doing every day. What does it look like? I don't know if it's too far-fetched. Like, Steph Curry's got this 30-minute routine that's just about shooting and dribbling that he does. And fans show up early just to watch him, right? I don't think necessarily we'll build a fan base where people watch us practice our leadership routines. But what if we had this 30-minute thing that it's actually real leadership practice, that we're like, oh, let me practice. What's the agility test of leadership? What is the thing that we could really do for 20 minutes every morning, maybe while we're stretching our back, getting out of bed, combining it with another skill that we can do?
Well, I think when, as you pointed out, like reading a field note every morning, there's an interesting thing there. It's the same thing every day, but it's different every day, right? So it's like, oh, I'm going to make this a part of my morning drill but there's also variation in it. And not like there's a thematic course over a period of time, but we refer back to the same ideas. And eventually you begin to become more like that person if you see the world that way, which is a great way to do it. But I think that any of these skills, and you could take any of the things that we try to get people to focus on, and how they make decisions, how they build relationships, how they motivate and inspire, as you said, or how they give feedback. And you could take any of those and say, all right, I have, in my sort of agenda of things I try to kind of build in regularly, I'm going to kind of use this sort of idea around feedback, or I'm going to make sure that I'm trying to, we have a behavior, I won't get into the details, but it's around the nature and the power of congratulating people that you don't know very well. Mm-hmm. So you have to be on the lookout for that. And so you might be saying, I'm going to look for a place to congratulate people for something real, and I'm going to do it in an authentic way, non-transactional. I'm not looking for anything in return. And I'd like to try to, maybe once a week is even enough on something like that. But the process of doing it entails steps, right? The process of having a particular kind of relationship conversation or feedback conversation, there may be a sequence of steps. And you can say, I'm going to try to have one of these a day. And you can just say, all right, here's that moment. Or maybe you don't even have it planned out specifically, but you know that you are. So all of a sudden that moment presents itself, and you're already ready to lean in to say, let me approach it with this behavior because I want this to be a part of my own style.
Right. Okay, so if it's feedback oriented, right? Mm-hmm. We've got 10 or 12 different feedback behaviors in our platform.
Right.
The one that is public is third-party compliments.
Yes, that's the one.
Feedback behavior, or is it technically a inspiration motivation behavior?
Oh, that's a motivation inspiration behavior. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah, but so good one to example.
Yeah, but
because you could do that every day.
Yes, you can. But I guess it's not. Behaviors aren't necessarily things that you can warm up with. Like
define it real quickly for everybody, so we don't get too far past it, because we only have 2 or 3 minutes left here. Define the third-party compliments for somebody who's listening.
Third-party compliment is this recognition that oftentimes the best leaders are stingy with their compliments because they have a tendency to recognize excellence wherever it is. And so they don't want to hand it out freely because of their stinginess, but they recognize the importance of giving out compliments in a way. So sometimes because of this juxtaposition between stinginess and knowing that it's important, the best way that we've found that the admired leaders do it is they offer those compliments to other people through a third party. And there's a lot
they know it'll get back to you. If I tell somebody else, Mikey's really brilliant on this particular kind of social media strategy, if I told you that, you might believe me, right? But you might also be like, does he want something from me? Or maybe he thinks I'm not so good in this other area. Whereas if I told somebody and it got back around to you, which it will, and maybe not today, it might be a month from now, it is, as somebody says, kind of like a time-released vitamin, right? Or it gets back around. You'd be like, well, that's nice to hear.
Yeah. No, that's the other reason.
Scott must really believe that, because like, why else would he have told somebody else?
Right. No.
So it's more powerful.
Admired leaders have a tendency to be averse to flattery as well.
Yeah,
right. They don't want to give it out. So they're looking for ways to be able to prove that the inspiration and motivation that they're giving out by way of a compliment is not a transactional thing. And so this is the way to dispel that, right? This is not, he must really think this. He's telling other people about it. And you're not asking the third party to carry it forward for you. It just 95% of the time it is carried forward, right? And that's where the time release comes in. So my issue with the idea of a warm up or a practice or routine, sometimes we think of it as more tactical if we're warming up with it. Like, I don't really mean this. I'm just warming up this way, right? It doesn't really count because I'm doing these dribble exercises, but it's not really a game. So it doesn't really count. Well, in leadership skills, every behavior counts every time, or it ought to. You ought to accept the obligation of it. And so some of these behaviors that you have, how do you become a better leader and practice this idea of what we're talking about in the field note? I think it's becoming more aware of the best behaviors that are out there and incorporating them into your life, even though they're kind of simple like this. practicing them every day.
It could even be, and this isn't like a particular behavior, but it could be like, well, before I make any statement in this meeting, I'd like to ask 2 questions. And I did this one myself this morning. So I was in a dialogue group this morning at a conference, and I can have a tendency to talk too much.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm going to try to ask 4 or 5 questions of other people in the group before I even offer an idea or a thought.
Yes.
And I got pretty close. Yeah.
Technically, your warm up is having had thought through that. Like you.
Yes, right. That's
exercise.
sure.
That technically is a game time exercise, not a warm up. So the warm up is the idea that you came to that idea that you needed to kind of self-regulate yourself even before you were in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was the thing that inspired you thinking that, right? Because that's where your warm up.
Just the hope for a better dialogue session, that it would work out better that way. Now, look, real quickly, and because we're right at time, obviously in the field note, the idea of watching somebody physically do something, play a sport, play an instrument, we can see how those things lend themselves. And we've here talked about behaviors you might be trying to build as habits into yourself. But one interesting thing that leaders can do is, because as we embody things like this, we can show the drill. And I remember early on in my career, I'm trying to give a non-sports one because I have lots of things I do in the gym that kind of lead to this.
Is this going to be a magic one?
No, this is when I first went to CBS News, right out of college, and I was on a fellowship program, and I was assigned to the Northeast Bureau, and the bureau, the head of the bureau, Bill Felling, he later became the national editor at CBS News. Part of the drill that he had was calling all of the CBS stations in the Northeast, to kind of check in on what they were covering that day. Uh-huh. And so this would be something
before Slack, before group text.
Yeah, this was in the mid to late 80s. Right. And so probably 87, 88. And so you would want to give an intern or somebody on a fellowship like me this kind of drudge work. But he taught me there is no such thing as drudge work, that the most innocuous conversation can lead to the moment of insight that becomes the lead story on the news that night, because sometimes people don't recognize the power of the own story they're telling you. And so the ability to call all of those stations was a privilege you had to earn. And so he made me, for a good period of time, listen in on an extension on the old-fashioned phones while he did it. And I listened to him, and I listened to him, and I listened to the way and the tone and how he interacted with people, and where he'd come back to a story, and he'd be like, well, tell me more about that one. And he had this manner that even later, when I was a local news anchor in small markets and large ones, usually the assignment desk would do what they called the check calls to the police stations and fire stations, and what's going on today, is there any news? And in the one city where I was, this would have been Erie, Pennsylvania, there were probably 75 calls that we would make. And I made them more often than most people. Like I would make them 2 or 3 times a shift. But when I had interns, I would do the same thing, because that was part of the excellence drill, is how's my story register? How am I attuned? And I figured that most of the police stations or fire stations, it wasn't the main anchor that was usually calling them. And so I thought, if I'm the guy whose face is on the camera that night, but they know they're talking to me and I'm interested in them and in their lives, that then as they're interested in the story, it's not just that I'll get a scoop, but that we're sort of cooperating in this idea of discovering the story that needs to be told. Yeah. And so that was a wonderful sort of drill to just do all the time, every day, and I miss doing it. So There you go.
No, that's another way that we could have titled this field note. Like, what is the drudge work in your life that you ought to be reincorporating, because it's the basics. Right?
Yeah, and if you do it right, it's not a drudge, it's a dance.
Right. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for your time this afternoon.
Indeed. Talk to you tomorrow.
Wow. All right. Bye now.